Alright, let's talk about the Crimson Desert. Crimson Desert is Pearl Abyss's huge open-world action RPG. If you've been living under a rock for the past year, I respect the peace. This is the same studio that made Black Desert Online, and Crimson Desert is basically their big idea, their best work, their "we want to prove we belong in the conversation with From Software and CD Projekt Red" moment. And for a long time, it looked like they were going to get it right. The coverage of the preview was amazing. We're talking about glowing reviews from places that are known for being hard to please. Digital Foundry, the people who will rip apart a game's performance and not lose a second of sleep over it, sat down with Crimson Desert's Black Space engine and came away almost buzzing. The frame rates were smooth. The pictures were amazing. The optimization seemed real. People who had thought of Pearl Abyss as that Korean MMO company were suddenly very interested. People were pre-ordering. There was a lot of excitement. Everyone had March 19th, 2026 marked on their calendars. And then, 7 days before the launch, Pearl Abyss quietly, very quietly, changed something on their Steam page. No news, no post on the blog, no update for the community. A few sharp-eyed players on SteamDB noticed a quiet change to a database entry in the middle of the night. And what did people think when they saw the changes? The internet went completely crazy. You need to know something before I tell you. Because this story has a twist that almost no one is talking about. A piece of information that changes how you should feel about everything. So please stay with me. By the end of this video, you might have a very different opinion about the whole thing than you do now. Let's get started. So this is what happened. The Steam listing for Crimson Desert was updated on March 12th, 2026, exactly 1 week before the game came out. It now has 2 new pieces of information. First, the game would use Denuvo anti-tamper DRM. Second, you could only install and activate the game on 5 different PCs at a time. That's all. That's the news. No fanfare, no reason given, no warning to the community. Pearl Abyss probably hoped that this small change to the database on a quiet Tuesday night would go unnoticed in the excitement of launch week. It didn't go unnoticed. The talk had blown up in just a few hours. There was a lot of activity on the Crimson Desert subreddit. There were threads on the PC Gaming subreddit that got hundreds of comments in less than 2 hours. There were Steam forum posts with titles like "Denuvo equals pre-order canceled" that were getting a lot of attention. And the word that was used over and over again to talk about what Pearl Abyss did? Disgusting. And look, I understand. I totally get why people felt that way. Let me explain the logic to you, because it's really strong. Think about the order of things here. Pearl Abyss spends months getting people excited about Crimson Desert. They work with Digital Foundry, one of the most trusted technical analysis channels in the gaming world, to do a detailed performance breakdown of their engine. Digital Foundry is impressed. They put their analysis out there. The numbers for performance look great. People who are on the fence see those numbers and say, okay, this is the real deal. I'm going to pre-order. And then, after everything else, you find out the game has Denuvo. After all the hype, the good press, and the pre-order money have been collected. If you're a PC gamer who has been hurt by Denuvo in the past, that series of events seems like a planned move. First, show them the nice performance numbers. Make sure the pre-orders are set in stone. Then, show the DRM when most people can't easily walk away anymore. Is that really what happened? Did Pearl Abyss purposely and cynically keep that information from people as a way to get them to pre-order? Or was this just a developer who didn't communicate well and thought people would find out through normal means? To be honest, I don't know. I don't think Pearl Abyss is going to tell us either way though. But I do know this. In this business, perception is reality. And the way people saw things in those first 24 hours was terrible. The gaming community, fairly or not, decided that this was a trick. And that idea spread quickly. If you think about it from the point of view of someone who pre-ordered this game because of those performance previews, the anger makes perfect sense. You saw Digital Foundry praise the engine. You saw the numbers that were used as a benchmark. You thought, finally, a big budget, open world RPG that runs well on PC. But then, a week before you get to play it, you find out that there's a piece of software on top of all that. This software is known for causing the same problems that the benchmarks made you think you were safe from. There were basically 3 groups of people in the community who reacted. Camp 1, angry, canceling all pre-orders right away and done with Pearl Abyss for good. Camp 2, worried but not too much, waiting to see how the first day of performance reviews go before making a decision. Camp 3, really not bothered, saying that the talk about Denuvo is overblown and they just want to play the game. And all 3 groups have a point. That's what makes this so interesting. But before we get into the argument, we need to talk about why so many people hate Denuvo. You might be wondering what the big deal is if you're not a serious PC gamer. It's just a way to stop copying, right? Copy protection is built into every piece of software. What makes this one different? Okay, let's learn about Denuvo. Please bear with me, this context is very important. An Austrian company made Denuvo Anti-Tamper, which is a way to protect software. Its job is to stop people from stealing games. In a nutshell, it runs checks in the background while you play and talks to external servers to make sure your copy of the game is real. These checks happen a lot and at the kernel level of your operating system, which means they can get to a lot of your system's resources. In theory, this sounds good. You bought the game and the checks show that you did. Now you can play it. What's wrong? The issue is that all of those background checks cost money. They use CPU cycles. They take up memory bandwidth. They take up processing time that your hardware could be using to, make the game itself. Adding that extra load can push things over the edge in games that are already pushing hardware to its limits, which is what almost every modern open world RPG is doing. We're not talking about worries that are just ideas. We have proof of purchase. Resident Evil Village is likely the most well-known one. At launch, players with high-end PCs were getting stuttering and frame time spikes that shouldn't have happened with the hardware they were using. It was clear, it was annoying. After a short time, Capcom took Denuvo out of the game, and all of a sudden, those stutters got a lot better. It was clear that there was a connection. The PC gaming community wrote a lot about it. There was no doubt about what had gone wrong. That's the thing about Denuvo. It adds what the community calls invisible overhead, which can slow down performance even when it doesn't completely destroy it. A kind of tax on Denuvo. It costs you a few frames here and there, adds some stuttering, and makes load times a little longer. If you look at each of those problems by itself, they might not seem like a big deal, but in an open world RPG where you play for 60, 80, or 100 hours or more, those little problems add up. They bother you. You shouldn't have to accept that if you paid full price for the game. You should also think about the requirement to check in online. Denuvo needs to call home every now and then to check your license. This means that if Denuvo's servers go down, which has happened, you might not be able to play a single player game you legally own. If your internet connection drops at the wrong time, it's the same problem. If you're playing a single player RPG and the server goes down, you might not be able to play your own game. That's really annoying. Some people will say, well, Denuvo has gotten better. Modern implementations are much less impactful than they used to be. And there is some truth to that. Over the years, the business has worked hard to cut costs. But the effects of past disasters are real. They are written down. And that is why the community always reacts strongly and quickly to a last-minute Denuvo announcement. Once bitten, twice shy. And this happens about 30 times in different games. This is where things get really complicated, and I think it deserves its own discussion. And this is something that came up a lot in community discussions, but I honestly hadn't thought of it until I saw people bring it up. If you want a refund, Steam's standard policy gives you 2 hours of playtime to make up your mind. 2 hours. If you've played for more than 2 hours or own the game for more than 2 weeks, you're in the maybe and contact support and hope for the best zone. For most games, 2 hours seems like a good amount of time, but think about how the first 2 hours of a huge open world RPG really look. You start the game for the first time, the shaders compile, which can take anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour with modern engines in 2026, depending on your hardware. After that, you're in the tutorial area. In games like this, the tutorial area is meant to be smooth and amazing because developers know that most people see the tutorial before deciding whether to keep or return the game. You're changing the settings for your graphics. You're learning how to use the controls. You're learning about the world and the people in it. You're probably just barely over 2 hours by the time you've done all of that. And here's the most important thing. The areas of an open world game where Denuvo is most likely to cause performance problems are not the tutorial fields and carefully optimized introductory zones. They're the cities that are full of people, the thick forests with hard to see distances, the places where the engine is really being pushed to its limits, the places you can't get to until hour 3, 4, or 5. So by the time you find out if Denuvo is slowing down your hardware in this game, it's too late to get your money back automatically. You're stuck. That's not a small issue. The community has every right to be angry about that big problem with protecting consumers. And to be honest, Steam's refund policy isn't set up to handle this well for big open world games. Sure, you have been patient. This is the thing I talked about in the hook that almost no one else is. While the internet was going crazy with people canceling pre-orders and forum threads getting hundreds of comments, Prolobis did something that depending on how you look at it, is either very reassuring or a masterclass in damage control spin. They put out a statement. In particular, they talked to Paul Tassi, a journalist for Forbes who covers the gaming industry and had been keeping a close eye on the Crimson Desert situation. And Pearl Abyss's main point was that all of the benchmark videos, performance previews, digital foundry analyses, and frame rate tests you have seen for Crimson Desert were all done on a version of the game that already had Denuvo installed. Read that again. The digital foundry breakdown that made so many PC gamers feel good about pre-ordering, Denuvo was running in the background the whole time those numbers were being taken. The benchmark videos that Pearl Abyss released themselves show their Black Space engine pushing impressive frame rates. Denuvo was there. Every single piece of good press that got people excited and made them want to buy it, all of it, every frame, was taken with Denuvo already built in. Now, what do you think about that? I've been really thinking about this, and I think it's worth taking a minute to really think about what this information means, since the community's response has been pretty mixed. If this is true, it's actually really good news. This is because the performance you saw in those previews is what you can expect at launch. There is no difference between the preview build without DRM and the retail build with DRM. What you saw is what you get. Denuvo works well with the game. Digital Foundry, one of the most technically demanding gaming sites, tested it with Denuvo and was happy with the results. That should be important, but does that really solve the main problem? This is where things get a little philosophical. A lot of the community's anger isn't really about performance. The practical issue is performance, but the emotional issue is transparency. It's about the feeling that you weren't given all the information you needed. It's about how you, as a buyer, didn't have all the information you needed to make a good choice when you gave them your money. Even if Denuvo has no effect on performance, if the game runs the same with and without it, you still have the right to know before you buy if your game uses software that needs online check-ins, limits machine activation, and is controlled by a third party that could, in theory, pull the rug out from under you years down the line. Some people in the community have been making the counter argument, which is a pretty good one, that this interpretation means you have to believe Pearl Abyss just decided to add Denuvo last week. And that's really not how this works. Think about it. Adding Denuvo to an AAA game isn't something you can do in a weekend. You can't just add it to a finished build in 7 days. Denuvo has to be built into the game while it is being made. People have to sign contracts months in advance. The implementation needs to be thoroughly tested against the game's systems. This takes a long time. That means Denuvo was always going to be a part of this game. It was never a surprise that it was added. The only question is when Pearl Abyss decided to tell people about it. They chose to tell people very late in the game, which could have been on purpose or just because they didn't plan their communication well. This is what I really think. The information Pearl Abyss gave about the preview builds is real. If Digital Foundry said the performance was good with Denuvo running, that means something. Digital Foundry doesn't make their analysis easier for anyone. If Denuvo worked well for them, the game probably runs well. That should give players who are worried at least a little reason to think twice before giving up on the game completely. But that doesn't make the communication failure completely okay. You should let people know about DRM ahead of time. That's it. Not even a week before launch. Not lost in a Steam DB database update that happened at midnight. That's not how you earn the trust of your community. And once you lose it, it's hard to get it back. The gaming space has a long, painful memory for these kinds of things. When Denuvo is added to a well-known game, the same thing happens in the comments every time. Someone says they won't buy the game. Another person says, just pirate it then. Everyone agrees that piracy is the best way to protest against anti-consumer DRM. That argument has some serious holes in it, except for 2026. This is the part of the community discussion about Crimson Desert that I found most interesting. It went into some very deep technical areas that most mainstream gaming news doesn't cover at all. This is the truth about where Denuvo cracking is right now. There was a kind of ongoing arms race between Denuvo and the cracking scene for years. Denuvo would put out a new version, crackers would eventually crack it, and then Denuvo would put out another update. Most games that were protected by Denuvo were cracked within weeks or months of their release back then. People who didn't like the DRM could eventually play the game without it. That time is mostly over. Using normal cracking methods, the current version of Denuvo is for all intents and purposes unbeatable. The technical problems have gotten so bad that the old ways of doing things don't work anymore. The community talks about Crimson Desert, went into great detail about why, and more importantly, what the only other option really is. A hypervisor crack is the only cracking method that has worked against modern Denuvo implementations. And I need you to know what that really means before you decide if just pirate it is a good idea. The truth is much darker than most people think. A hypervisor is a program that makes a virtual layer between your operating system and the hardware it runs on. Hypervisors are usually used for completely legal things, like running virtual machines and putting sensitive work in a security sandbox. But when it comes to cracking Denuvo, a hypervisor is used to get in the way of and change the DRM's kernel-level operations. In short, it makes a fake environment that Denuvo thinks its checks are passing when they're really being faked. This is the issue. For any of that to work, a hypervisor crack needs to have access to the kernel of your PC. We are talking about the most complete access that software can have to your computer. You can get to more than your antivirus software, more access than the security features built into your operating system, full, unrestricted access to the root. If a bad person gets this kind of access, they can see everything on your computer, change anything, install anything, and steal any data without you knowing about it. And the person who gave you this hypervisor crack is an anonymous person on the internet whose real name you don't know, whose reasons for doing so you can't check, and whose code you can't check yourself. Consider what that means. You don't want to give Perlibis your money because you're worried about Denuvo having access to your whole system. So instead, you're going to let a random person on the internet have full access to your PC's kernel. Anyone could be that person. Anyone could have put anything in that code. Keyloggers, stealers of passwords, cryptocurrency miners are hiding in the background. Backdoors that don't do anything for months and then suddenly turn on when you don't remember them. This isn't just paranoid thinking. This is a real security vector that has been written down. One of the most dangerous things you can do to a PC is give kernel-level access to code from unknown, unverified sources. And that's why something amazing has happened in response. The big piracy groups that have been around for decades and care about keeping their users' trust have started to actively ban any talk of hypervisor cracks. Not because they've changed their minds about piracy, not because they like Denuvo, but they know that sharing hypervisor cracks is a great way to spread malware without being caught. Even piracy groups won't touch it because the risk to end users is so high. So here's the truth that the Just Pirate It crowd doesn't want to hear. If you're a PC gamer who really hates Denuvo and you're thinking about pirating Crimson Desert as a way to protest, your real choices in 2026 are pay for the game and deal with Denuvo is the first option. Option 2, don't play the game at all. Option 3, let a stranger on the internet have root access to your computer and hope they're one of the good guys. When you put it that way, option 3 stops looking like a principled protest by consumers and starts looking like a nightmare for information security. It's pretty ironic that you would object to Denuvo's deep system access by installing software with even deeper system access from a source you don't know. So the real benefit of modern Denuvo is that it doesn't just stop piracy. It's that the cost of getting around it has gone up so much that most people only have two options: buy the game or don't play it. That's a real change from how things were just a few years ago. And that's a big part of why publishers are relying on Denuvo more than ever in 2026, because it works in a way it didn't before. That's a much bigger question. Is that a good thing for the long-term gaming ecosystem? Or does it mean that control over how software can be used is becoming too centralized? But this is the world we live in right now, and it affects how we should think about the Crimson Desert situation. Okay, let's take a step back. The Crimson Desert Denuvo situation is interesting on its own, but it's also a perfect, almost textbook example of a much bigger problem that the gaming community has been trying to fix for years, but keeps failing to do so: the habit of pre-ordering games online. I want to be clear, I'm not here to make anyone feel bad. There are many reasons why people pre-order games. Sometimes you're just so excited that you want to make the purchase and move on. Sometimes there is a discount. There are sometimes bonuses for early access or cosmetics that come out on launch day. I get all of those reasons. I did it myself. We've all pretty much done it. But the Crimson Desert situation is a perfect example of why pre-ordering is almost never in your best interest as a consumer, especially when it comes to digital purchases. Let me tell you what pre-ordering is and isn't doing. Pre-ordering makes perfect sense when you're buying a physical item that really is in short supply, like a limited edition console bundle, a specific sneaker that will only be available in small numbers, or a physical collector's item. You're getting a unit that might not be available in any other way. You're protecting yourself from a real-world lack of something. The pre-order has a purpose. There is no stock of digital games. None. Nothing. On March 19th, the Steam store will still have have copies of Crimson Desert. If you wait 24 hours, you won't miss your chance to buy it. The game will be there tomorrow, next week, next month, and even 2 years from now. You can buy it with just one click, and it might even be cheaper after a sale. There is no limit on the supply in any part of the equation. When you take away the excitement and marketing language, pre-ordering really just turns your excitement into money for the developer before you have all the information you need to make a fully informed decision about whether or not to buy. Before you can tell if the PC port is good or bad. Before you find out if there's hidden DRM. Before you can tell if the review scores match the preview coverage. Before you find out if there are any bugs on day one that will break the game and need a patch. Before you know anything that could really affect how much you enjoy the game or how much you regret buying it. You're giving them your money based on feelings and promises. And this field has given us years and years of proof that those promises don't always come true. We all know what's on the list. The launches that came after amazing previews, non-stop hype, and incentives to pre-order, only to arrive at their destination in various states of disrepair. Millions of people pre-ordered Cyberpunk 2077, but when they got their consoles, they found that they barely worked. No Man's Sky was so far from what its marketing promised that it became a cultural meme about games that are overhyped. Battlefield 2042, Song, The Split, many more over the years. Each one taught me that hype and the quality of the product are not the same thing. And every single time, the people who waited a week for reviews and real player feedback were in a much better position than the people who gave their money based on trailers and developer presentations. The thing is, in the digital age, waiting doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to wait in line overnight. There is no chance that a product will run out. You're not missing a short time frame. All you're doing by waiting is getting real information from real players on real hardware before you make a financial decision. That is always better than not having that information, no matter what. Here's what I think you should do with Crimson Desert. Cancel your pre-order if you have one. Not because the game will be bad. It could be really good. Don't do it because Perlibis doesn't need your money before the game comes out. Get your money back. If the reviews are good, you can always buy the game again on day one. Then don't buy it right away on March 19th. Give it 6 hours. If Digital Foundry puts out a day one PC review, watch it. Look at the reviews on Steam. Look at the subreddits just for PC gaming. Check to see if the retail build works the same way as the preview builds. Check to see if Perlibis's claim that Denuvo is in the benchmarks is true when real players test the real release version on their own hardware. If everything looks good, if the performance is good, if the Denuvo implementation is clean, and if the reviews match the previews, then go ahead and buy it. You can pay full price if you want. You haven't lost much by waiting a few hours, and you now know exactly what you're paying for, which is a good thing. And if things don't work out, if there are stutters that the previews didn't show, if there are performance problems that make it seem like the retail build and preview build weren't the same, or if Denuvo is making things worse, then you've saved yourself money and trouble. This is what vote with your wallet really means in real life. Not canceling your pre-order in a Twitter thread full of rage and then buying the game anyway at midnight on launch day. It means waiting 24 hours, getting real information, and then making a choice based on that information instead of what the developer says. There was a lot of noise in the Crimson Desert community about this Denuvo issue, and that noise is important because it lets publishers know that these choices have a cost to their reputation. But noise that doesn't change how people buy things doesn't do anything. Waiting is what really makes things happen. Actually keeping your money until you know what you want to buy. So here's my real, honest opinion on everything we've talked about here. Not the inflammatory version that makes people angry. Not the Perlibis are bad guys version. Also, not the gamers are overreacting version. After spending a lot of time going through all of this is what I really think. Perlibis messed up when they talked to you. It was a big deal, and it could have been avoided. The result is the same whether it was done on purpose or by accident. A lot of players felt misled, and that feeling has real and long-lasting effects on how people see a studio. You can't build up months of goodwill with great preview coverage and then add DRM a week before launch and expect people to be okay with it. That's not how trust works. You gain trust over time, but you lose it quickly, and this was a completely unnecessary way to lose it. The statement about the preview builds is also very important. Digital Foundry is one of the most technically demanding and unforgiving sites in the gaming world. If they looked at this game with Denuvo running and were happy with how it worked, that is strong evidence. That's not nothing. It doesn't fix the problem with communication, but it does address the real worry about whether the game will work well. And in the end, the practical concern is what most players care about the most. As I've said, the piracy talk is mostly a dead end in 2026. If you care about the security of your PC, the math on hypervisor cracks just doesn't add up. For most people, the only real choices are to buy it or not play it. You have every right to not support a game that handled its DRM disclosure this way. There is no right or wrong answer there. It's your choice. And the lesson about pre-ordering is one that I will always remember because it applies to more than just this situation. For years, the gaming industry has been teaching players to pre-order, and about half the time, players have been rewarded for their loyalty. They've been burned the other half of the time. In the digital age, when there is no limit on supply, the habit of pre-ordering is helping the publisher much more than it is helping you. One of the best games of 2026 could be Crimson Desert. Pearl Abyss is a talented company, and their engine is clearly very good. If the launch version lives up to what those previews said, it could be a groundbreaking open world game. I really hope it does what it says it will. I want good games to do well, but you should be able to make the choice to support it with all the facts. And the Denuvo disclosure situation means that not everyone got that chance. Wait for the start, look at the reviews, then make a choice. That's all I have. Okay. That's all I know about the Crimson Desert Denuvo case. When I started pulling on the thread, I didn't expect this one to have so many layers. I think the preview build revelation is a big deal that changes the conversation in a big way and should get more attention than it's getting right now. But I really want to know what you think about this. Does a last-minute Denuvo announcement ruin your excitement for a game? Or do you really not care, as long as the game is fun and runs well? Put your answer in the comments.